that same Steve. He's still that. But now you're also seeing another side of him that he never had to see.
Interesting things, and I think about this all the time, is from the time Bernie passed till now, certainly I think society has changed, the way they digest entertainment has changed. So I think it would have been difficult. I think a lot of people would have had a hard time with some of the things.
I'm telling people you work with, I don't want you even to be next to me. Like, I have such disdain for you that I am annoyed by your presence.
Steve Harvey always carried himself like a man who already won at life. Sharp suits, million-dollar smile, and that unshakable confidence that made him one of TV's most recognizable faces. From Family Feud to the Steve Harvey Show, Miss Universe, and those viral motivational clips, he built an empire of charisma and hustle. But lately, that perfect image is starting to crack. Because now...
His TV concert. Okay, this was the one he had on NBC just recently. Whatever, yeah. That's the one that, damn. Who took his show from me? Kelly Clarkson. How can Kelly Clarkson...
The same comedy world that once crowned him is turning against him, and what these comedians are exposing could completely rewrite his legacy. Behind all those jokes and motivational speeches, a darker story seems to be surfacing. One that suggests Steve Harvey's climb to fame might not have been as spotless as it looked. Some insiders claim he built his empire on borrowed jokes, broken friendships, and backdoor moves that left a long trail of resentment in the comedy world. Let's rewind a bit. This is the same Steve who preaches about faith while throwing shade at people who don't follow his version of it, from gay folks to Asians. Steve came up during comedy's golden era in the late 80s and 90s, surrounded by legends Bernie Mac, Cedric the Entertainer, D.L. Hughley, Monique, and later Cat Williams. These comedians respected each other because they all knew the grind, sleepless nights, $50 gigs, and the raw hunger to make it. But somewhere along the way, the brotherhood cracked. One of Steve's own peers even said, "My sister burned too many bridges, and there's nothing I can do for her now." Comedian Mark Curry, yes, the same one from Hagging with Mr. Cooper, came forward saying Steve didn't just borrow inspiration, he flat out stole. According to Mark, Steve lifted one of his most personal childhood stories, a Halloween bit, and performed it word for word on national TV without credit. In comedy, that's unforgivable. Stealing material is like stealing someone's identity. And the worst part? Mark wasn't the only one calling him out. Over time, the whispers started growing louder in Hollywood's backrooms.
Said that about the first wife. You forget that? You told us it was her, then you went and married somebody else that think like a man. Like, what are you talking about? They think they can rewrite history.
More and more comedians began hinting that Steve Harvey's material wasn't entirely his own. And when too many voices start echoing the same claim, people stop brushing it off as gossip. Even Bernie Mac, the people's king of comedy, reportedly had his own issues with Steve. "That's my story, not his," Bernie allegedly said. And it didn't stop there. According to comedian Mark Curry, Steve was far from homeless during his come-up. He was pulling in $3,000 a show, 5 nights a week, while telling sob stories about struggle and sleeping in his car. Bernie Mac supposedly got his big break in Ocean's 11. But here's where things took a dark turn. Rumor has it Steve tried convincing producers he was a better fit for the role. Imagine that, your so-called brother in comedy, trying to steal your Hollywood shine behind your back. That's not ambition, that's betrayal. Then came Cat Williams, who didn't hold back either. In one of his classic interviews, he called Steve out directly, saying he wasn't the king of comedy, he was the king of stealing jokes. Cat even mocked his image, calling him a country bumpkin who looks like Mr. Potato Head. Brutal. But underneath the jokes, Cat's message was dead serious. He said Steve's southern charm and humble beginnings were nothing but a performance. And then came Monique, one of the strongest voices in comedy, whose fallout with Steve left fans stunned. When she spoke up about being blackballed for refusing to play Hollywood's dirty game, Steve went on national TV and told her flat out she was wrong. His advice? Stop playing the integrity game. Start playing the money game. That one line changed everything. You could see the pain on Monique's face because to her, Steve wasn't just another celebrity.
we'll call each other because we feel for each other because we know the real person.
Right. Yeah.
I know they lying about you online. I know that podcast is bullshit. Hang in there, dog. Don't pay no attention to that.
Yeah.
Because and look, man, just because you can talk smooth without saying it don't mean you ain't lying.
Right.
I be sitting up here looking at these podcasts of these other comedians that's going on talking about other comedians. Hold up, dog. Where did that shit come from? When did we become that? When did we get into tear each other down business? Because you ain't never heard me say not a disparaging remark against another comedian nowhere. You ain't heard him or him. Because we ain't cut from that cloth. Right. So what is your motive for doing this here? And
he was supposed to be a brother, a fellow soldier from the comedy trenches who stood for truth and loyalty. But right there on live TV, he showed his true allegiance, not to his people, but to power, image, and the Hollywood machine. That moment went viral because it revealed a split screen, Monique fighting for integrity while Steve defended the system that chews people up. And from that moment, fans started piecing things together. It wasn't the first time Steve was accused of protecting his brand over his brothers. Even D.L. Hughley, one of his oldest friends from the Kings of Comedy era, made a comment that hit differently. He said, "Steve knows how to survive in every room." Sounds like a compliment at first, until you realize what he meant. D.L. wasn't smiling. He meant Steve can shapeshift, humble and faith-driven in public, but all business and dominance behind closed doors. That ability to adapt made him unstoppable, but it also made people feel like his success came at their expense. Mark Curry shared a story that proved that feeling wasn't paranoia. He said he confronted Steve face-to-face about stealing one of his personal bits, and Steve just brushed it off, like it was nothing. Then Mark turned on his TV one night and saw that same story being performed by Steve, word for word, to millions. Imagine that, your own life experience, repackaged as someone else's punchline. In comedy, that's not just theft, that's betrayal. And yet, while the bodies pile behind him, Steve's career just kept skyrocketing. From dingy comedy clubs to primetime TV, he became the face of success, the family man, the faith preacher, the motivational guru in the sharpest suits on television. But behind the polish, whispers turned into patterns. People in his own circle started saying, "Steve don't keep friends, he keeps opportunities." That came from someone who worked on his old radio crew, and it stuck because it fit. Once you're no longer useful to Steve, you're gone. Maybe that's a real secret behind his longevity. Maybe Steve figured out something most people don't. Hollywood doesn't reward kindness, it rewards control. Loyalty gets you overlooked, but leverage gets you remembered. And sure, it worked, but it left scars. Now, those scars are finally starting to show. Cat Williams, Mark Curry, Bernie Mac, Monique, all at different points, hinted that Steve's empire was built on someone else's foundation. Even Steve once slipped up and admitted, "I've done things I ain't proud of, but when you're hungry, you eat what's in front of you." Back then, it sounded metaphorical. Now, it feels like confession. Maybe this isn't just a story about comedy. Maybe it's a warning about what fame really costs. Steve Harvey's success is undeniable. But as more voices start speaking up, the question keeps getting louder. Did he earn his crown, or just play the game better than everyone else? Because in Hollywood, talent gets you noticed, but ruthlessness gets you remembered. Back in the 90s, when the Kings of Comedy tour shook the culture, Steve Harvey stood shoulder to shoulder with Bernie Mac, Cedric the Entertainer, and D.L. Hughley. On stage, it looked like unity, 4 legends, 1 crown, making history every night. But behind the curtain, the brotherhood was fractured. Bernie, the People's King, later admitted he never fully trusted Steve. Rumors spread that Steve once tried to undercut him again after Bernie landed Ocean's 11, calling producers to say he'd be a better fit. That wasn't competition. That was betrayal. When Bernie passed away in 2008, that rift never healed. And when Steve gave his public tributes, fans noticed something off. They sounded more like self-promotion than sorrow. He positioned himself as the last king standing, the torchbearer of an era, but the people didn't buy it. To them, it felt like Steve wasn't honoring a brother. He was rewriting history to make sure his crown stayed on straight. To this day, People still say Bernie Mac was a people's king, and Steve Harvey was television's king. That one difference says it all. Bernie earned love through raw honesty and heart, while Steve earned fame through polished, clean suits, slick speeches, and a made-for-TV image that's soul perfection. Then there's Cat Williams, the one man in comedy who never bites his tongue. Cat went straight for Steve's neck, accusing him not only of stealing jokes but even entire shows. He said the Steve Harvey Show was basically a copy of Haggin with Mr. Cooper, both centered around a stylish, middle-aged comedian teaching kids and preaching life lessons. Coincidence? Maybe. But when you stack the details next to each other, Cat's point hits harder than people want to admit. And when you add in Mark Curry's story that Steve used to show up at his gigs, watch his sets, and later repeat the same material on TV, it stops sounding like inspiration and starts looking like a habit. Mark even said he confronted Steve face-to-face, told him, "You're using my material," and Steve just shrugged. That moment summed it all up. When you're powerful enough, rules start to feel optional. Once Steve became America's favorite host, who was really going to check him? Nobody wanted to believe that a man who preached about faith and family could also be the same one accused of stepping on others to climb. That's what makes this story so wild. It's not about one joke or one feud. It's about the machine behind it. Hollywood protects its chosen ones. The same industry that destroys dreamers will bend over backward to protect a brand that sells. Steve had already crafted his image as a clean-cut family man, God-fearing, loyal, motivational. So when these stories started popping up, people couldn't process it. They didn't want to. But that's the illusion Hollywood runs on. The better you control your image, the harder it is for truth to break through. Even D.L. Hughley, who's known Steve for decades, started letting small truths slip. He said, "Steve knows how to survive in any room." It sounds harmless, but the weight behind it is heavy. It means Steve mastered the art of code switching, becoming whoever he needs to be to stay relevant, saying what people want to hear, and keeping his spot secure. That kind of adaptability makes you untouchable in Hollywood, but it also makes people question your soul. At some point, everyone starts wondering, who is the real Steve Harvey? Then came Monique. Her clash with Steve stripped his Mr. Positive mask clean off. When she spoke out about being blackballed after Precious, Steve didn't defend her. He defended Hollywood. On live TV, he told her, "This ain't the integrity game. This the money game." You could see the heartbreak in her face. She said she loved Steve, but she couldn't understand how a man who preached faith and loyalty could side with the same system that tried to silence her. That moment went viral because it exposed something deeper. Steve wasn't just disagreeing. He was protecting his own seat at the table. But here's the twist. No matter how many accusations, feuds, or controversies hit him, Steve never falls off. His career only gets bigger. He's like Teflon. Nothing sticks. From the Miss Universe blunder, when he crowned the wrong winner, to the backlash over his relationship advice, Steve always spins the story and comes back stronger. Most people would have been canceled after that Miss Universe mistake, but Steve turned it into a joke and hosted again the next year like nothing happened. That's not luck, that's control. Steve's been in the game long enough to understand how to protect his image at all costs. But that kind of power comes with a dark side, because when you learn to survive every storm, you stop caring about who drowns. And now, the ones left behind are finally starting to talk, comedians, co-workers, even his old radio staff. They say the man behind the smile is nothing like the man on screen. Strict, cold, calculating. Someone who runs his empire like a business, not a brotherhood. They said one wrong word could end your job, that Steve demanded perfection but gave little loyalty in return. It's like two Steves exist, the public saint and the private strategist. And that's what makes his story so fascinating, how a man can build an empire on charm, yet leave behind a trail of people feeling used, replaced, or betrayed. Steve once said, "You got to be willing to do whatever it takes." Maybe that's exactly what he did. But now, everyone's asking the same question. How far is too far when the price of success is trust itself? Because in the end, Steve Harvey might have won the money game, but at what cost? Because for every joke told, every smile flashed, and every success story tied to Steve Harvey's name, there's a line of people who say they paid the price for his rise. And when you start connecting the dots, his story stops sounding like a fairy tale and starts feeling like a survival manual. Steve once said, "When you're hungry, you eat what's in front of you." Maybe that was his quiet confession, that in his climb to the top, nothing was ever off-limits. He's reinvented himself more than anyone in comedy. Stand-up comic, sitcom star, radio host, TV mogul, preacher, and businessman. But with every new version came fresh polish and a fresh list of people left behind. Now, those forgotten voices are getting louder. Mark Curry's old interviews are resurfacing. Cat Williams keeps firing shots, exposing the industry's dirty secrets and calling out what others won't. Monique still stands on principle, replaying that painful TV moment when Steve told her to play the money game. And through it all, Bernie Mac's legacy lingers, a reminder that real kings of comedy didn't need Hollywood's validation to earn respect. When fans revisit Bernie's old interviews about loyalty and love for the craft, then compare it to Steve's self-appointed last king standing image, it hits different, because audiences can always feel what's real and what's rehearsed. That's why this story cuts so deep. It's not just about who told what joke first. It's about who stayed authentic when the fame came calling. Steve's entire brand has always been built around image, faith, family, and hard work. But behind the scenes, insiders say he's cold, calculated, and quick to cut anyone who questions him. Former radio staff said working with him felt like walking on eggshells. One slip, and you were gone. That kind of reputation doesn't come from a bad day. It comes from years of control and strategy. And yet, no matter how much heat comes his way, Steve never crumbles. He's like Hollywood's ultimate survivor. Scandal after scandal, from the Miss Universe fiasco to backlash over his relationship advice, nothing sticks. His suit stays sharp, his smile stays wide, and somehow his speeches keep trending. That's not coincidence. That's power. Real power. The kind that comes from knowing how to control your story before anyone else can. But that same skill that made him untouchable might be the thing that exposes him next. Because no power lasts forever, and karma never misses its mark. Now, the people who watched him climb are finally talking. Comedians, co-workers, and radio insiders, all peeling back the layers of the man behind the empire. They describe two Steves, the charming mentor America sees and the strict, cutthroat boss they knew. Someone who treated loyalty like a business contract, useful until it wasn't. Maybe that's why so many of his peers, Bernie Mac, Monique, Cat Williams, Mark Curry, all echo the same theme. They don't sound bitter. They sound hurt. Because when enough people tell the same story, it's no longer gossip. It's a pattern. Even D.L. Hughley, usually loyal to Steve, dropped a truth bomb that stuck. He said, "You can't please everybody, but you can be real with yourself." And that right there is Steve's biggest struggle. Because it's easy to please Hollywood when you're willing to play by its rules. But the streets remember who you were before the spotlight hit. And that's where his biggest fight lies, between the man he wants the world to see and the one the comedy world remembers. Still, no one can deny Steve's grind. His hustle is unmatched. He built an empire of discipline, charisma, and an unrelenting work ethic. But every empire has a foundation, and if that foundation's cracked, sooner or later, it falls. For years, Steve's been preaching faith, prayer, and hard work. But now, fans are asking, what if the story he's selling isn't the one he lived? What if behind every laugh, there's a lie? What if the real lesson isn't about winning, but about what you lose trying to get there? Because the more people come forward, the clearer it becomes. Steve Harvey's story isn't just about success, it's about survival by any means. And when fame turns into survival, it's easy to lose the soul that got you there. Maybe that's a real price of being a king of comedy in a business that values ratings over loyalty. The spotlight may love you for a while, but the truth always shines brighter. So now the real question isn't if Steve Harvey's karma will catch up, it's when. Because you can dodge critics, you can dodge headlines, but you can't dodge your reflection once the cameras stop rolling. The same spotlight that made him a legend might just be the one that exposes everything he tried to hide. So what do you think? Did Steve Harvey climb fair and square, or did he step on others to get there? Drop your thought in the comments, because this story isn't over. Hollywood may have built his image, but the comedy world is finally tearing down the curtain. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the next chapter of this story might just shake the industry to its core.